I kept postponing the difficult thing. There is a conversation I needed to have with my mother for 4 years before I had it. I want to be precise about that number, because the precision is part of the point. Not a long time. Not a while. 4 years. 48 months of knowing exactly what needed to be said, and choosing, each time the moment approached, not to say it. What I told myself during those 4 years was not that I was avoiding anything. That is the important detail. I was not, in my own account of what I was doing, a person who was afraid to have a difficult conversation. I was a person who was waiting for the right conditions. The timing wasn't good. She was going through something difficult and I didn't want to add to it. The holidays were coming and this was not the moment to introduce that kind of wait. Things had been relatively stable recently and it would be a disruption. I'd bring it up soon, once I had figured out exactly what I wanted to say. Each of these justifications was, on its own terms, reasonable. That is the structure I want to describe, not reckless avoidance, which is easy to identify, but what I would call structured procrastination, the deferral of a specific necessary thing through a rotating sequence of individually defensible reasons, none of which are obviously wrong, all of which together add up to years. The thing I was deferring was a conversation about how my mother and I had related to each other for most of my adult life. A specific pattern between us, of expectation, of pressure, of love that arrived wrapped in conditions I had never agreed to. I had understood this pattern clearly for years. I had talked about it in detail with people I trusted. I knew what I wanted to say, and approximately how I wanted to say it. What I did not do was say it. The psychological mechanism operating in structured procrastination is more sophisticated than simple fear, though fear is present. What makes it different is the self-protective cognition that wraps around the fear and makes it invisible. The reasoning that I was offering myself, it's not the right moment, conditions will improve, I need more preparation, was not consciously dishonest. I believed it at the time of believing it. Each deferral felt genuinely justified. But if you look at the pattern across time rather than at any individual decision, something becomes visible that isn't visible in the moment. The justifications were inexhaustible. There was always a reason. The reasons changed, the specific content rotated, but the structure remained constant. A new reason appeared with exactly the timing required to prevent the next opportunity from becoming the actual occasion. This is the signature of avoidance disguised as judgment. Genuine judgment about timing does not produce a perfect, unbroken sequence of deferrals across 4 years. Genuine judgment produces a delay followed by action when the delay has served its purpose. What I had instead was a system that was, in functional terms, designed to prevent the conversation from happening while generating the continuous experience of being a person who was merely waiting for the appropriate moment. The deferred thing was not sitting still while I waited. This is what I did not understand clearly until much later, and what I want to name carefully. The thing you are not doing is doing something to you, even while you are not doing it. Every month the conversation didn't happen, it accumulated more weight. More history. More episodes that would need to be addressed when the conversation finally occurred. More evidence that I had been aware of the pattern and had chosen not to raise it, which my mother would know, and which would require its own accounting. The longer I waited, the more defended the territory became. The deferral was not preserving the conversation for a better moment. It was building walls around it. In the 4th year, something happened that I had not anticipated. I ran out of credible justifications. Not because the stock of possible reasons was exhausted, there are always more reasons, but because I had begun to see the pattern itself rather than just the individual reasons. And once you see the pattern, the next individual reason stops working the way it used to. You reach for it and it feels hollow. You know what it is. It is not judgment about timing. It is the mechanism protecting itself. I called my mother on a Tuesday evening in November, which was not a special occasion and not a moment I had prepared extensively. I had notes, but I didn't use most of them. I said the things that were true, as directly as I could manage, without a great deal of preamble. The conversation was difficult. It was not a catastrophe. She heard more of it than I expected her to hear. We did not resolve everything. We resolved something. What struck me most, afterward, was not relief, though there was relief. It was the realization of how much energy the deferral had been using. Not dramatic energy, not acute distress, but a constant low-level expenditure I had stopped noticing because it had been present for so long. The background processing of, I still haven't had that conversation. The recurring calculations about whether this particular moment was the right one. The management of every interaction with my mother in light of the thing I was not addressing. All of that stopped. Immediately, and completely. The conversation was one afternoon. The overhead it eliminated had been running for 4 years. The lesson I draw from this is not about courage, exactly. It is about arithmetic. The deferred difficult thing is not free. It has a carrying cost, paid continuously, in small amounts, often below the threshold of conscious awareness. And that carrying cost does not decrease with time. It tends to increase, as the thing gathers more weight, more complexity, more layers of reasons why it is now even more difficult to approach than it was before. The calculation that justifies deferral, it is not the right moment, I will be better prepared later, conditions will improve, systematically underestimates the cost of the deferral and overestimates the benefit of waiting. The right moment, in almost every case I can examine honestly, was sooner than the moment I chose. Not always immediately, but sooner. And the preparation that waiting was supposed to produce, I was not, in any meaningful way, more prepared after 4 years than I had been at the beginning. I knew the same things. I had the same understanding. What I had gained was not readiness. What I had gained was more years of not having done it. The difficult conversation does not improve in storage. The decision you are not making does not become clearer by being left unmade. The thing you are carrying while you wait for a better moment to put it down is heavier every week you carry it, not lighter. This is what structured deferral hides from you. It presents itself as patience, and what it is delay. It presents itself as preparation, and what it is accumulation. The moment you are waiting for is, most of the time, already here. It has been here for a while. You are the only thing that is not. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. honestly, without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable, it builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.